welcome back. We're on episode 66, I believe. I feel like I'm constantly getting the numbers wrong, but let's give it a bash, 66. I thought we deserved a little bit of a calmer episode, having had the horrible two-parter of Richard Ramirez. I thought we deserved to kick back and relax and go on a little tour today. I just want to give a huge shout out to the Monday Night Review patrons. Thank you so much for your support. I love doing the mini-sodes for you. There wasn't one last week because I was elbows up in the Night Stalker, but we've got little stories up there. I will get the first bit of merch up for you ASAP, but it is my joy to see you there, so thank you so much. And yeah, we're going to have a bit of a gentler week today. We're going on a little visit. We're going to see some creepy castles. This is going to be part one because there are a lot of creepy castles out there. So yeah, we're going on a bit of a world tour. Didn't want to keep it just British. We're going all over the shop today. So we're starting off in Houskha Castle, which sits 29 miles north of Prague in the Czech Republic, and it is considered to be one of the best preserved examples of the early Gothic period. Its placement doesn't really make sense. There's no reason for it to be there. There's no kitchen, no defensive walls. It's of no strategic importance, and it's sort of weird that it's there. It's also worth mentioning that for many it's considered to be the gateway to hell. Built in the 13th century for the Emperor Ottokar II of Bohemia, it's basically an admin centre for managing his royal estates. But then it went on being passed from aristocrat to aristocrat. But as I pointed out earlier, there's no kitchen, which means they're not expecting people to stay there for long. There's no defensive walls. It's just a very odd place to have somewhere. As Bohemian chronicler Václav Hajdek detailed in his Czech Chronicle in 1541, the first known structure at the site was a small wooden fort in the 9th century. I should apologise. Throughout this, I'm not a natural linguist. I'm going to be really bad at pronouncing half the stuff in this episode, so I'm apologise in advance for your ears. Local legend maintains that the castle was actually built to keep the demons from spilling out through a massive crack in the limestone rather than sort of defensively to keep people in. There are stories of strange creatures crawling out of the hole at night, chimera that are half human, half animal, and black-winged creatures the size of humans flying around the courtyard. Though it's technically not far from Prague, it's in an area of forests, mountains and swamps with no running water. You have to catch rainwater to drink it, and it's far from any trade routes. Again, why exactly is it here? In the 18th century it fell into disrepair, but was purchased by Princess Hohenlohe in 1894, and in 1924 was bought by President of Skoda, Joseph Simonek, whose family still own it today. It did have a dalliance with the Nazis. Occupied by the Wehrmacht until 1945, there are rumours that they did a lot of experiments into the occult while they were there. Some believe that they occupied it for that purpose. They, if anyone's going to want to own the gate of hell, it will be the Nazis. Some stating that they were using the powers of hell to create kind of magical forces that were on their side. Others believe that it was an ideal place for Lebensborn, which is the breeding of ideal German babies. So, although it's not confirmed that that's what went on there, lots of people believe that that's what went on there. So some people say it's the chapel that's built over the large hole in the ground, which is believed to be the gateway to hell. And the hole is so deep that no one has ever been to the bottom of it. And at the time of it being built, those who were sentenced to death were offered a reprieve if they volunteered to be lowered by rope into the hole and report back on what was down there. When the first prisoner was lowered, he started screaming within a few seconds, and when he was brought back up, he had aged 30 years, his hair completely white and his face covered in wrinkles, and the man died of fright a few days later. After this happened, the pit was sealed and the chapel built over the top of it with defensive walls facing inwards towards the chapel in case anything ever emerged. Later on, demonic frescoes were added to the walls of the chapel, and some reported the sound of strange scratching under the chapel floor. As you can imagine, this castle is a magnet for ghost hunters and tours. Lots of people have reported seeing a dark, faceless figure in various parts of the castle. But, I mean, I've watched a lot of footage of these ghost hunts, and there's a lot of sort of, did you see that? Did you not see that? Tapping, knocking noises. Nothing hugely confirmed. So then we're moving on to Dudley Castle, a bit closer to home for most of us. It's believed to be constructed after the Norman conquest in around 1070, though that would have been a wooden structure that no longer exists. And what stands now are the ruins of a stone fortification built around the 12th century, which was destroyed during the reign of Henry II and rebuilt in the second half of the 13th century. And now there's a zoo located in its grounds. It's not surprising that somewhere as old as Dudley Castle has its fair share of ghost sightings, and in fact these go back to 1870. In the 1930s, a guide at the castle reported, "It happened on a fairly quiet afternoon. I was sitting at the bottom of the castle keep with two other people in full view of the doorway, when suddenly two elderly people came around from the keep dressed in either 17th or 18th century clothes. They were walking arm in arm, and the man held a crooked walking stick and wore a very tall hat. They walked straight past us and up into the keep. I went up after them, but there was no one there. They had just disappeared." Now, this is obviously very exciting because there's 3 people who saw it. The zoo staff in the 1960s would hear moans and groans, and doors would open and close by themselves. And in 1966, a teenage worker at the zoo said he heard a strange moaning sound and then saw the shape of a woman in a white gown. He resigned straight after, so either it was a ploy to get out of a job he didn't like, or he was genuinely terrified by what he saw. It could be that he saw the famous Grey Lady, who's associated with Dudley Castle and believed to be Dorothy Beaumont, the wife of a royalist. She is thought to have died in childbirth while the castle was besieged by parliamentary forces in 1646 and still roams the area of the castle to this day. Another story maintains that an old woman lived in the castle keep and was found hanged off the battlements with her black cat dead beneath her feet. Obviously, some believe this to be self-inflicted, but others maintain that some men found her about to fly off the top of the battlements with her cat on the Sabbath, but caught her round the neck and pushed her and her cat to their doom. So she was either a very distressed lady who killed herself or a witch who was hanged without trial. Either way, not a happy story. In 1983, there was a medieval evening with a prize for the best medieval costume. In the crowd, the judges saw an elderly woman wearing a sackcloth shift and grey shawl with feet wrapped in sacking. She looked very different from the others and so authentic that they awarded her the prize, but she disappeared. Officials on the gate said that she hadn't gone past them, so it's believed that perhaps this is the lady who had thrown herself or been thrown off the battlements. The castle chapel dates back to the 14th century, and a monk has often been seen in a large window that overlooks the courtyard. You can see rumoured photographic evidence of this if you have a Google around. I'll put it on our social media. It's not that monk-like to me. There are, of course, numerous ghost hunts and overnight stays at the castle, many of whom report noises, taps on the shoulder, and either the monk or the Grey Lady gliding about. In 2020, a team led by Jane Harris, who apparently has a TV show called Help, My House is Haunted, which I have never seen, captured a dark shadow in a doorway, which they only saw later when they were checking out the footage. Now, to me, I have to say, it looks like the night vision camera readjusting as it's moved, but I'd love you guys to check it out and let me know what you think. After their investigation finished, the castle historian was going around locking up, and she said that she heard voices in the tower when she knew that everyone had left. Now, another paranormal investigator, Craig Mahoney, said in 2019 that he was in the castle keep going down the stairs when he heard a man behind him clearly say, "Excuse me," as if he wanted to get past. When Mahoney turns around, there was no one there, and the atmosphere became very threatening, and he felt like he was going to be pushed down the stairs at any moment. He says now he would never go back to the castle keep even in daytime, which I'm not sure makes you a great paranormal investigator. But, you know, I'm not one, so I'll shut up. So that's Dudley Castle. Definitely worth a visit. Now we're going to Japan. We're going to Himeji Castle, which dates back to 1333 when a fort was built by Akamatsu Norimura, the ruler of the ancient province in Honshu, Japan. It was built by his son in 1346 and remodeled again in 1545 into the basic structure of the castle that stands today. It was restructured, expanded and extended with moats and towers added. Though many castles were demolished in the Meiji period, it was in fact just slightly smashed about to make it into an army barracks after that it was abandoned in 1871. Though the area was heavily bombed in 1945, the castle remained intact. Even when a firebomb landed in the courtyard, it failed to explode. It's pretty impressive when you see pictures of this castle because it stands out. You'd have thought it would make a really obvious target. In 1995, the city of Himeji was severely damaged by an earthquake, but again, the castle survived virtually undamaged. It's believed to be protected by magic ceramic tiles and boasts internal mazes designed to confuse invaders. Its bright white exterior walls make it stand out for miles and has earned it the nickname White Heron Castle. As you will know, if you listen to episode 62 on Japanese spirits, the Japanese don't do hauntings and legends by half, and the castle of Himeji is no different. Associated with many local legends, one is Banshu Sarayashiki, the tale of a servant girl, Okiku, who was falsely accused of stealing dishes that were really valuable gold family treasures. Apparently, she had in fact refused to become the mistress of the man of the house, and so he told his wife that Akiku had been hiding her gold dishes, and Akiku is killed and thrown into a well, and now it's believed that her ghost haunts the well at night, counting dishes in a despondent tone. The yokai Osaka Bahimi lurks in one of the towers. She's a hater of people and comes out once a year to meet the castle lord to tell him the fate of the castle for the next year. She is believed to be the spirit of an illegitimate child born to the emperor's mistress and his son. She takes the form of an older woman, although some people just have her down as a woman in her 30s, thanks very much, and wears a ceremonial 12-layer kimono. She can read human minds and control their decisions, and she can control animals. There's also a rumour that the master carpenter in charge of the construction of the keep was so dissatisfied with his work, which he believed listed slightly to the southeast, that he jumped from the roof of the keep with a chisel in his mouth. Jumping would be enough, Japan. The chisel is an extra Japanese twist of horror. Thanks for that. Now we're heading off to Bangarah Fort, which is rumoured to be the most haunted place in India. Built in the 16th century in the state of Rajasthan, 146 miles from Delhi, and accessible by a 2-kilometre unpaved road, Not only is it believed to be haunted, but actually cursed. And if you visit today, you'll see government signs warning you not to stay after sunset. Rumour has it that a religious man, Guru Balu Nath, lived in the grounds of the fort before it was built and liked to meditate in a specific spot. The king begged him and pleaded with him to be allowed to build the fort, and Guru Nath agreed on the conditions that no shadows of any buildings should fall upon him in his meditation spot. If they did, the fort would be destroyed. Now, of course, the fort is built, and some of the towers cast a shadow on the meditation spot, and the fort was destroyed. And it's perhaps this curse that has led to all the buildings in the fort to be roofless. Any roofs that are built there collapse, no matter if they're built, the latest, most modern way, they all collapse, and some have killed people when they fall. So now all the buildings there are roofless. Another tale tells of a priest who was a practitioner of black magic and fell in love with a beautiful Bangarah princess who's described as the jewel of the area. One day he follows her to the marketplace and tries to give her a love potion, and she refuses it, throwing it onto a large rock that then rolls onto the priest and crushes him to death. Before he dies, he cursed the entire village, condemning it to destruction and desolation. Visitors there have experienced and still experience feelings of unease and paranoia, like they're being followed whilst walking around the fort, and many don't stay long. It's believed that the spirits who roam at night will cause anyone who ventures there after sunset to not return. I'm fairly sure it's more of a health and safety thing. People prattling about in a remote falling down fort at night in the dark doesn't sound like an ideal situation for the local government when you're miles away from the nearest hospital, and in fact you're 2 kilometres down an unpaved road. There are in fact a ton of injuries and accidents linked to the fort. Most famously, 3 men decided to stay in Bangarah Fort at night and see if it really was haunted. And despite having a torch, one of them fell into a really steep well, and he was rescued by his friends who rushed to take him to hospital. But all 3 of them died in a road accident while they were on their way. The locals believe that's all down to the curse. Now, possibly, from my research, the most haunted castle yet, and it brands itself as the most haunted castle, so it would be rude not to cover it. We're going to talk about Leap Castle, 4 miles north of Roscrea in Coolderry, County Offaly, Ireland, and built by the O'Bannon clan around 1250 AD. It was originally called Leap of the O'Bannons, but in Gaelic. And it's believed that a stone structure has occupied the site since at least the Iron Age, which is 500 BCE. That's a long time. It was partially destroyed in 1516 when Gerald Fitzgerald, the Earl of Kildare, tried to seize it, but it remained in the possession of the O'Carroll clan, who had taken it from the O'Bannons and who were plagued by terrible and bloody family feuds. Following the death of Mulrooney O'Carroll in 1532, a fierce rivalry for leadership erupted within his family. He'd left no will to say which of his sons would take over the castle. One of the brothers, Thaddeus, was a priest, and while he was holding mass for a group of the family in what is now called the Bloody Chapel, his brother, Tay, burst into the chapel, plunged his sword into Thaddeus, fatally wounding him. The butchered priest fell across the altar and died in front of his family, and it's thought that he still roams around the chapel to this day. From the 1880s onward, Mildred Darby, an author of Gothic novels and lover of seances, was lady of the house, and it's thought that she's part of the reason for Leap's popularity and history of haunting. During renovation of the castle in the 1900s, workers found a hidden dungeon behind a wall in the chapel. At the bottom of the shaft were so many human skeletons that all on wooden spikes. And when they cleaned this out, it took 3 cartloads to remove all the bones. There were that many. Now, the dungeon has since been covered up to keep people away from it, but it's thought that the O'Carrolls would drop guests through the trap doors to be impaled on spikes 8 feet below. A small gold pocket watch was found at the time, dating back to the 1800s, and it shows how recently the horrible dungeon may have been used. The ghost of the Red Lady is reported to walk the halls holding a dagger. She is believed to have been held prisoner and repeatedly raped by the O'Carrolls. And when she had a baby, it was taken and killed, and she became inconsolable. Her ghost walks the halls at night, trying to track down her baby's killer. 2 little girls named Charlotte and Emily run up and down the spiral staircase. Emily died after she fell from the battlements on the top of the castle's tower, and Charlotte can be seen running after her sister and calling her name. The governess, as she's called by the people who work there, will often appear at the same time as the children, and she's known to brush against visitors. One visitor from Sweden describes it as being like when a dog butt brushes past your leg. The castle is also haunted by a sinister elemental spirit referred to as It. Some believe that this is summoned by druids or by a warring clan coming to try and take over the castle. Others think it's the result of an unhappy spirit from a past inhabitant. The creature was described by Mildred Darby as being about the size of a sheep with a human face, black holes for eyes and a nose, and giving off the smell of a rotting corpse. And lots of people have said that they see this thing and there is this putrid smell. There's also what I call the whispering, which happened in my house as a child, as I've mentioned, which is the sound of a group of people whispering a conversation as if trying not to disturb other people in the building. No specific words can be made out, and if you go to the place where you think it's coming from, it will then sound like it's coming from somewhere else. This is experienced by the current owner, Sean Ryan, who offers tours and will happily chat to visitors and tell them about the various hauntings he experiences regularly. Leap Castle is definitely on my list of places I want to go. So the Castle of Good Hope is the oldest existing building in South Africa. Built by the Dutch East India Company between 1666 and 1679 in a pentangular shape, the work was carried out by slaves and sailors, and the castle designed to protect the Dutch from the British Navy. In 1936, it was declared a historical monument. The original bell, made in Amsterdam in 1697 and weighing over 300 kilograms or 660 pounds, still hangs. The bell was used to give warning to the inhabitants of the surrounding area and to mark the time. And inside the castle walls were bakery, shops, living quarters, prison cells, and a church. During the Second Boer War from 1899 to 1902, the castle was used as a prison. And the castle was not a nice place to be a prisoner. Punishments at the castle included dismemberment, dragging through the castle attached to a horse, piercings with a stake at the gallows, whippings and beatings, and long periods of isolation in the prison cells or the dungeon. The worst part was called the Donkergat, the dark hole, which is basically a windowless dungeon where prisoners could be held for days, weeks, or even years with no light. It sometimes flooded in the winter, so it would drown any prisoners that were trapped in there. Workers and visitors report hearing noises and footsteps in the dungeon and the narrow corridors. The bell has apparently rung by itself, despite the bell tower being bricked up centuries ago. Rumour has it that a soldier once hanged himself using the bell rope, so it's thought that it could be his spirit causing the bell to ring. But there's more to it than just footsteps and noises. A vicious black dog has lunged at people before suddenly disappearing. There are also claims of a tall, luminous man leaping off the castle walls, disappearing right before he hits the ground. A man and a woman are frequently heard arguing near the guards' room, but only one shapeless figure is ever seen there. The soldiers who still guard the castle at night avoid going through the archways if possible. They believe there are restless spirits inside. Lady Anne Bernard lived in the castle from the late 18th century and was responsible for entertaining any important guests that visited, and it would seem she took her role very seriously, as she still appears when the castle is visited by important people. The ghost of Governor Peter Gisbert van Noot is believed to haunt the Castle of Good Hope. He was a strict man and he sentenced a lot of people to death, but when he sentenced 7 men to death on the 23rd of April 1728, he refused to grant one prisoner's last wish before he was hanged, and the condemned man cursed Van Noot. Later that day, Van Noot was found dead in his office, having died of a heart attack with a look of surprise on his face, and today workers and visitors experience his presence, hearing him cursing and swearing inside the castle walls. Bran Castle, you may have heard of. It sits 16 miles southwest of Brasov in Transylvania, where my dog is from. More famously known as Dracula's Castle, named as the home of the title character in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which, let's remember, is a work of fiction. There's no actual evidence that Stoker knew the castle existed, and it only has loose connections with Vlad III, who's also known as Vlad the Impaler or Vlad Dracula. Vlad III was the ruler of Wallachia, a historical geographical region of Romania, and Castle Bran was on the Transylvanian border with Wallachia and therefore would not have been a very welcoming, pleasant place if Vlad had paid a visit. Really, the only link between Bran Castle and Dracula is that Vlad the Impaler was sometimes called Vlad Dracula, and Stoker, while reading about the dastardly deeds of this ruler, pinched his name. The castle dates to around 1377 and took 11 years to build. Once the Wallachia border moved, the castle became an administrative seat until 1888, when the administration was moved elsewhere and the castle fell into disrepair for over 30 years. Later, it was inhabited by foresters, woodmen, and forest inspectors from Brasov. Until 1918, after Transylvania became part of Greater Romania, Bran was offered to Queen Maria of Romania in 1920 and became her favourite residence. I'm not surprised, it's really beautiful. Unlike the crumbling abode that houses the original vampire, Bran is very well looked after and beautiful, and it's hard to find any sensible discussion on haunting that's not linked to the fictional Dracula. There have, of course, been a ton of paranormal investigations in there, but I find it difficult to separate the real from the imagined. For example, the torture room, that a lot happens there, but did this really exist? Is it just called the torture room because obviously people are going to want to visit it? Also, surely the ghosts would be speaking in some form of Romanian. So it's weird when English-speaking ghost hunters go and communicate with them. Either the ghosts have spent their last however long in death learning English, or something's amiss. Still, there are sightings of dark, shadowy figures, strange green mists, and several dark corridors underneath the castle where people feel really unwell. I want to mention that Dracula actually means son of dragon, and Vlad's father took the sobriquet of Dracul, dragon, after receiving the Order of the Dragon. So he's literally Vlad Dracula, just means he's Vlad Dracul's son. I do love the book Dracula, though, by Bram Stoker, so if you haven't read it, go and check it out. It's a perfect time of year for it. Nice, cosy, cuddle down, read a scary book. I also just want to share that my mother visited Transylvania recently, a couple of years ago. My son is obsessed with vampires, so my mother felt the need, she had to go all out. So they went to the town that was rumoured to be the fictional, obviously, birthplace of Dracula. And during dinner in what was allegedly his house, the waiter asked if anyone would like to go upstairs to see Dracula's bedroom. Everyone said no, except my mother, who, out of grandmotherly duty, was going to go. So she went upstairs. The waiter took her up there, and he said, "Wait a minute." And so he went in, she waited for about 5 minutes, and then a voice shouts, "Come in," and she goes in, and the waiter has got into a coffin and sits up as she arrives. And I think says some sort of Dracula-y appropriate things. And there's a lot of like red lights and scary Dracula stuff. Anyway, my mother being my mother, I think probably struggled to conceal her laughter, as did the waiter in his coffin. And I'm so pleased she did. It brought us hours of mirth. So you know, if you go to the area, don't be too cool to visit Dracula's house and see his bedroom. It's going to give you a good time. And that is Haunted Castles Part 1. Much less horrendous than our journey with the Night Stalker. The sources this week have been all over the place, but Wikipedia was great. littlehouseofhorrors.com was very helpful. Lots of castles on there. But obviously you can go and Google away any of these that you want to find more info on. And if you like watching people pretending that they're being haunted by Dracula in a castle that's nothing to do with Dracula, then you can look on YouTube. There's tons of it. I love to hear from you, so please email. I'm planning on doing a listener stories for Halloween, so it would be really lovely for you to mail me or message me with your spooky story or real life happenings or anything like that I can share. I'm happy for it to be anonymous if you'd like it to be anonymous, but it would be so nice to be able to do a spooky Halloween episode for you. You can find us on social media at The Monday Night Revue. You can email me themondaynightrevue@gmail.com, and you can join the Patreon where you get lots of extra things. For the lowest, for just £1 a month, you can listen to everything ad free. And then it goes up in a couple of tiers and you get extra content and all of that. And you get a lot of love from me all day, every day through mental telepathy. And until next week, be kind, stay safe, and always check the back seat before you drive.